pretty sure Zahawi once said that he would be frightened to live in Britain with Farage as Prime Minister.
Yeah, that's correct. And these are all things that we put to them today in what was, let's be honest, a very uncomfortable press conference. And, you know, for the Reform Party, obviously this is a big coup for them, getting these big people on board. But does there come to a point where it's going to hit them in the polls that the anti-establishment party becomes the establishment because they're taking so many people that used to be in government? Is this really something that's going to help Reform get ready for government and help win over those Tories that they potentially need to get on?
And was it Nadhim Zahawi's conversion to Reform policy that led him to join? Was it the ideas about inheritance tax or about income tax that made him join? Or was it, as Conservative campaign headquarters have suggested, that as recently at the end of last year, Mr Zahawi was turned down twice when he asked to be elevated to the House of Lords?
Well,
one wonders.
Well,
Natasha.
one does wonder.
Serious
and also,
wondering.
Exactly, serious wondering going on here. There's Rishi Sunak's resignation on his list that Mr Zahawi was not on. There was Boris Johnson's resignation list, which Mr Zahawi was not on. Obviously, he is no longer an MP. What does he want? What does he want to do? And he, you know, said today, well, I could be sitting back here and enjoying my political retirement, but I am coming out, he said today, to be a foot soldier for the potential Reform government.
He was briefly Chancellor of the Exchequer, you may remember, during the chaotic Boris Johnson days, and he was Tory party chairman. The Tories responded earlier on by saying that Zahawi had begged them for a peerage and had only defected when it became clear he wasn't getting one. Here he is explaining why he's gone over.
From the Highlands of Scotland to the bottom of Cornwall, from rural Wales to the beating heart of London, we can all see that our beautiful, ancient, kind, magical island story has reached a dark and dangerous chapter. I'm inspired by their concern over the broiling social tensions out there in the country, and in my view, the undervalued risk of sustained civil unrest if we don't get back on track. In short, ladies and gentlemen, I'm inspired by Reform.
Well, here to give us all the details is LBC's political correspondent, Aggie Chambre. Aggie, this beautiful, ancient, magical politician himself is responsible for some slightly embarrassing tweets, it turns out.
I'm afraid so, Andrew. They've both been around a rather long time. And so, yes, there are some tweets that everyone's managed to dig up today pretty easily, I should say. So Nadhim Zahawi in 2015 said that Nigel Farage had made a remark that Goebbels would be proud of, branded Farage deeply racist. Farage has also said, I thought Zahawi had principles, but tonight we learned all he's interested in is climbing the greasy pole. That was in 2022. Zahawi also warned about divisive and racist rhetoric associated with Farage's approach. He was actually asked about those comments today and sort of in the press conference. They both seemed to laugh it off, but it is still pretty embarrassing. And there's also a bit of a backlash today to Nadhim Zahawi going over, because I think a lot of people in the Tories especially, and some in Reform UK too, are saying, look, the last election was basically about getting the Conservatives out of power. They were hated by so many of the electorate, and taking on many former Tory MPs really does come with a risk, because voters might increasingly stop seeing Reform UK as a change vote and see them as another Westminster establishment party. Having said that, the thing that Nigel Farage admits that their party is at the moment lacking is experience in government. And if the polls are to be believed, they could very well be forming the next government, but they just don't have people who understand how that works. Now, today that has changed, because Nadhim Zahawi is somebody...
He knows his way around Whitehall, doesn't he?
He knows his way around Whitehall.
And he had it's fair to say, I think, a checkered career. He was kicked out as Tory chairman after a big tax row. But at the same time, he was quite revered almost, certainly respected for his role during the vaccine rollout and the COVID pandemic, which makes it a little bit odd that he's now in a party with so many vaccine sceptics in it.
I hoped you'd bring this up, Andrew. Yeah, he was very much seen as the architect of the vaccine rollout. But of course, one of the things that Reform UK has done in the last few months is platform at their conference a man called Asim Malhotra, sometimes described as a Reform UK health advisor. And he said on this stage that he wanted to share what an oncologist had said to him, that he thinks it's highly likely COVID vaccines have been a significant factor in cancers in the royal family. Now, he was asked about these comments today at a press conference, and this was the response first from Nigel Farage and then from Nadhim Zahawi.
as Nadhim said previously, we get all sorts of speakers from all over the world, some of whom have different opinions.
Can I just come in, Tony?
Please.
I expected more from you, right? That was a really stupid question, right? And it doesn't even deserve an answer. So try again next time.
OK, I would say more than knocked there. Very, very interesting defection. Not clear yet whether it's going to be a good thing for reform or not. Aggie, Chambre, for now, thank you very much indeed. And let's look at the impact of these big defections on reform in general and Nigel Farage in particular. Let's discuss that with Keiran Pedley, the Director of Politics at Ipsos Mori. Keiran, thanks very much indeed for joining me. We get a lot of razzmatazz and kerfuffle at Westminster when these defections happen, exciting press conferences. Does the public actually notice?
Good evening, Andrew. I mean, I think it's fair to say that this is unlikely to move the dial. We did some polling at Ipsos last April where we asked about hypothetical defections to reform for people like Suella Braverman, Liz Truss and Robert Jenrick. And in each case, the majority of the public said they thought that those defections would make no difference, or they couldn't say how they would respond, although Robert Jenrick was seen as a slightly better get than Liz Truss. I think with these things, what's probably more important is less the individual defection itself, but more the broader political message that's sent. Our polling shows that one of the biggest reservations the public have with reform being in government is their lack of experience. Nadhim Zahawi certainly addresses that to some extent. At the same time, Reform UK, one of their key benefits is that they're seen as real change. And so the more ex-Conservative ministers or cabinet ministers you get within Reform UK's ranks, the more Labour and others can say this is just the Conservative Party rebranded. So there's a balancing act to be struck here, but I don't think this individual story tonight is going to move the polls too much.
Keiran, while I've got you here, I must ask you about some new polling coming out at the moment about the party leaders in general, because it seems that Kemi Badenoch is making some progress, not just against Keir Starmer, but also against Nigel Farage.
Yeah, so we had a series of head-to-head polls who would make the best Prime Minister before Christmas. And you're right, we found at Ipsos that Kemi Badenoch was neck and neck with Nigel Farage and neck and neck with Keir Starmer. So her poll ratings have certainly improved over the recent past, which does create an interesting dynamic now. If the Conservative Party is able to recover somewhat, that could eat into Reform UK's lead, because whilst Reform UK support does not entirely come from Conservative votes, it primarily has done in the past. Whereas Keir Starmer has his own challenges versus Farage, Badenoch, and obviously internal Labour rivals too.
And is it possible at this stage to say what's happening to reform momentum? Because they had that magical thing, momentum, and then it seemed to stall for a while. Is it still stalled?
I mean, I think it's probably stalled, but it's stalled in the sense that they're convincingly ahead of both the Labour Party and
a good place to stall.
I mean, it's a good place to stall. We should also bear in mind that there are a series of elections coming up in May, as if we could forget local elections across England, but also elections in Scotland and Wales too. Reform UK are likely to do very well in various parts of those. So I think that any momentum stalling, we might not want to count our chickens there, I think.